Writing can be challenging even for the best of readers out there. And so in this video, I want to share with you a very simple strategy that you can start incorporating into your writing lessons to help support all writers. So in my previous video, I talked about why writing is hard. And if you haven't seen that, I encourage you to go and check that video out before you jump into understanding and utilizing this strategy into your classroom. Because we have to understand the purpose and the reasons for our strategies and why we're going to be incorporating them into our lessons in the first place. And so that's going to give you a really clear understanding of the background and the why into what this strategy is going to do for your students. So how do we help our struggling writers when it comes to organizing their text? That seems to be the most challenging part, really. It's getting kids to organize their thoughts and then put it onto paper. And why is that so hard? Well, because they have a lot happening inside of their brains and they're holding on to all of that information in their working memory. And then they're trying to combine it with the syntax and semantics and being able to think about the spelling patterns that are happening there. It's just a lot for students. And in that last video, I talked about Joan Sedita's writing rope. And the writing rope consists of a variety of components that help to build a proficient writer. And one of the components that she mentions is text structures. And text structures is all about organizing our thoughts and putting them onto paper and making sure that we're including elements that go along with the genre that we're writing. The big thing is that we're not just writing one type of genre. We're teaching kids to write many different forms of genres, whether it's a personal narrative, a creative narrative, an informational, an opinion, a research paper. Each of those is going to have its own structures to help build an effective writing piece. And so we have to teach students about those structures and understanding the organization and the why for where sentences are going to be structured and placed within that paragraph or within the entire structure of the paper. And so the activity that I'm going to share with you will really help them to be able to see, which is one of the biggest parts that I love about this activity, but it's going to help them to see each of those components and the role that it plays within the paragraph or the paper that you're going to have students work with. Now, I'm going to show you this activity with two different levels, and then you can kind of fill in the in-between. I'm going to show you a very introductory basic level, and then I'm going to show you one that's more advanced. And then that way you have an understanding of where do your students need to be able to fall. Or maybe it's that you need them to progressively get to the more advanced piece. And so you want to start with that basic component and then allow them to build to the more complex version of building their text structures. So the activity itself not only is going to help them be able to yet again see the structures of that writing piece, but it's also going to benefit them collaboratively. Because this activity is one in which where students are working with either a pair or within a small group, they're having the opportunities to be able to share their thinking, to be able to process their thinking with somebody else, to hear a variety of perspectives, and to just kind of talk through it. One of the most benefit pieces of instruction is when we allow students to be able to collaboratively process and work through the content itself. And writing can be really hard to be able to do that because it's like, well, how much collaborativeness can we offer students when they're having to write independently? I totally understand you. That's why this activity is so important, because it offers that collaborative piece, that discussion that happens beforehand, and it's going to allow them to be able to think about, why is this sentence important here? Or why did I place this phrase here? It's going to get them thinking about the relationship that all of the words and phrases and sentences have with one another and the reasons in which they're organized in a specific way. And so the activity itself is just a sort. That is literally all it is. It is nothing fancy. And one of the things that I love about bridging literacy is because we like to keep learning simple. Why? Not because we are truly lazy teachers, but more so about the fact that we want the focus to be on the learning, not the activity. So the focus here is going to be on the learning experience and students acquiring knowledge. So students are working through this progression, working with text structures, building this collaboratively before they ever start with their writing. Okay, so let's go ahead. I'm going to jump into the first type, which is going to be the lower basic level of discussion and building of text structures. So here's the first sample activity. This is going to be one for a personal narrative or a creative narrative that you can do with students. So what the teacher does in advance is builds out a paragraph or a paper. Of course, you don't want to do this with something that's incredibly long because then it's going to be really challenging or it's going to take them a while to get through. So this was a paragraph to kind of get them into the structures of that paragraph itself. And all I did is I wrote out my text and then I placed them onto individual sentences or sections. That way, students had to think about the organization of that text. So what they would do is I would place them into either pairs or I would place them either in groups of 3. I like groups of 3, no more than 3, because then once we start getting into 4, students are just not as collaborative or somebody ends up getting left out. And what they do here is that they will simply read each of these pieces of the text and they will put them in that order. So here I could say, books have always taken me to places my dreams could only bring to life. Nothing would prepare me for the dream that I would be living. Ooh, that's such a good one. I rushed down to the kitchen where my mom was baking my favorite chocolate chip cookies. Mom, can we please go to the library? I don't have anything to read. Nothing? I didn't have a single thing to read. Okay, so we already know that they didn't have anything to read here, so I'm going to place this one up here, and I'm just going to continue to organize it. Again, nothing, but as I got ready to leave, an old book caught my attention. Restricted. Poop. I decided to take it away. Oh, wait a second. So maybe we're going to have it here. That old book would later change my life. Okay, so mom was always understanding of my passion for books and happily agreed to take me that day. Oh, that definitely happened after they asked if they could go to the library. I rustled through my bookshelf looking for something to read. While at the library, I scanned through the shelves in hopes to find a new book that was added to the dinosaur collection. Okay, so this was definitely here. And I think what I'm going to do is, because it's the bookshelf, where at home it changes with the setting of the text. So this would be in their room. Nothing. I didn't have a single thing to read. I rushed down to the kitchen where my mom was baking my favorite chocolate chip cookies. And so you can kind of see the organization, and this wasn't the entire text, but you can see the organization of that paragraph itself, and how students were going to be structuring this piece. So it would allow them to go through it. So you could see that there was some form of a hook. We had to have events that took them downstairs. This ended up leading to them asking to go to the library. And then, of course, looking through the restricted section and finding that old book and kind of leaving that little bit of a cliffhanger for them. So the activity itself had students really think about the organization of this paragraph. It had a hook. It had a clear beginning, middle, and end. The beginning was looking for the books. The middle was asking to go to the library. The end was finding a book. So it had that clear beginning, middle, and end, and getting students to understand the transitions from one to the other. One of the things that I could have done to make this more advanced was include transition words or phrases to help students kind of see that picture. Now, you want to be careful with transition words or phrases because you don't want students to fall into the trap of first this happened, next this happened, then this happened, last this happened, because it becomes very redundant. And we want to increase students' awareness of the variety of transition words that are out there and build in more complexity with how they are writing. But here it was really just focusing in on those components of that structure for the paragraph and getting them thinking about the purpose and the reason for each of them. Now, of course, you're going to do this with all of the various genres that you're teaching. You can teach this at the very beginning of the unit to help them get started with it, or as students start to get into that section where they're going to start with their rough drafts or organizing their writing, then you can incorporate this into that piece or that lesson itself to help support students along the way. So with non nonfiction, we're looking at a very specific structure. One of the beauties about nonfiction is that there's no subjectiveness. In any form of fictional writing, the subjectiveness is how descriptive we are, how much details we're providing within the writing itself. And so it can really vary from one student to another. However, if we teach the text structures appropriately to our students for the nonfiction side of writing, then every student's writing should look somewhat the same because it's going to be consistent with that text structure that we're looking for. So let's take a look at a text and what this activity might look like for more advanced spaces. Just remembering that as I show this to you, you can make it a little bit more simple like I showed you with the narrative piece. So with this narrative piece, they were just looking at a variety of sentences. There's nothing that's chopped up, but now we're going to take a look at one that's a little more advanced. So for this activity, because this is different than personal narrative, I want to give students a text to be able to reference as they're working to build the text here. So in this one, I had a great white shark endangered or danger or endangered. And then I give them a little pack with all of the various sentences and phrases and transition words located in here. Do you see how already this is much more complex than this version here? Now you can absolutely begin with this type of version rather than having students be able to dissect it. But this is a more advanced format and it's really beneficial as you start to get students kind of dissecting what this writing is meant to look like. So to give you an idea, here is what I wanted to show you. This is how I structured it. So here's the writing that I gave students. Then from here, I had each of these on its own slide and I just typed everything in. So transitions are all the color orange and you can or do not have to tell them this, but I also wrote the prompt down here as well. So the focus is on writing an opinion essay that states your opinion on sharks. Are sharks more dangerous to humans or are humans more dangerous to sharks? Apologies about that. But then we have the opinion and reasons, which is the color pink. So that's what this one looks like. And then we have the evidence, which is the color blue. Then we have the explanations, which are green. You have the conclusion transitions. And then finally, the conclusion supports that are in red. So knowing that and how I kind of structured that in my document to be able to get this printed out for them, then students are working together to begin putting all of these pieces. So here's my prompt using this specific text, and students will work collaboratively to start to see where all of these pieces fall together. Well, if we remember that pink are going to be my reasons and my opinions. So you can, as a transition, tell students about the colors to help them understand what they are. That's a great scaffolding piece for some of your students or all of your students, depending on their needs. So here I would say that this is my opinion, and then I can see that we have some pieces of evidence, and then I would say that that's kind of my last piece there. Okay, so now I would start to add in all of my transitions. So I would take a look at all the transitions that I have and see where exactly they would go based on the text and how they need to be written. So I'm going to keep my transitions off to the side because that's going to help me be able to look at them and add them as I go, or come back to the end and add them at the very end. So you can see there's a lot of variations here. This shows that, the article states that, based, first, next, lastly. And I think I'm going to say, first of all, sharks are more endangered than tigers. Next, and then I'm going to say lastly. And then I'm going to start building in. If we go back and we think about what our colors represent, we have pieces of evidence. So our evidence has to support each of the reasons that we provide. And so if I pull those out here, tigers have been endangered. Okay. I would say over several years that there has been an increase in pollution and the bites. Okay, do you see how now we're structuring the organization here? How we see by seeing the colors and the organization that they have and they play with one another. And then I'm going to have my pieces of explanation. So each of these is going to have to also fall in between. So this is going to be something that grows with students and that they're going to start to find the relationship here. And then I can build in and add. So the article states that. So you can kind of see the relationships here, and it would build and grow with students. Now, again, this is much more complex. And if you wanted to bring it into a version that is not necessarily as complex, you could do a version like this, or you can build in kind of a little bit of both to be able to scaffold this process for students. But this is how they would be able to structure it and talking about why certain pieces would go in certain locations to help them understand the text structure of that writing. Hopefully you've seen from both of these demonstrations how this process can really help students understand the organization of writing and how it's going to also benefit them when they start to go back and start to formulate their own forms of writing. And what I like about this is that it can be utilized year after year after year. You write it one time and then it kind of sticks. But the biggest piece and the part that you're probably sitting here thinking is, oh my gosh, I have to do all of this by myself, like for every single form of writing. Well, if you're a Bridging Literacy community member, you have access to the resources that I'm giving you today. So everything that you see in this video is going to be within the community, and you can just go and check that out within the Writing Anchor activities. So make sure you're going to the Writing Anchor activities to find all these resources. If you're not a Bridging Literacy member, here are some tips to help you get started. One, I would have you think about the organization of that writing. So focus in on your specific grade level. What are the expectations for that grade level when it comes to writing instruction? And then going and writing out an example of that writing piece. So that way you have an exemplar. From the exemplar, you then want to create a document, just as I showed you with the pieces of colored paper here. So you want to create a Google Slides is what I ended up doing. I created this with shapes and text structures. So for each color, I had it on a new page. And what I did is I placed the what it was, the type of sentences that I was writing on the very bottom, and that helped to keep me structured and organized when I was creating this. So that way it makes it a little bit easier for you. So again, you can kind of see the colors here, what they all represent. And then of course, you're going to make those adjustments based on your grade level. And maybe you're only going to focus in on one paragraph if you're 6th grade, or you want to do an introductory paragraph because you're teaching introductory paragraphs and you want students to be able to build that, or you want them to build one of the body paragraphs so that they can understand the structure of that specific body paragraph. So you may not want to do the entire text because that would take a really long time, but you could do parts of the text, especially as you start to introduce them, because you're not going to have students write an introductory, a conclusion paragraph, and all 3 paragraphs all at once, especially if this is a brand new skill and you're just getting them started with the explicit instruction. But you might introduce one little area or component, have them work on an activity like this and building that collaborativeness and understanding the text structure of that, and then going back out and starting to practice with that skill. So that is the breakdown for this activity. It's super simple. It's basically a sort to help them understand the text structures of those specific writing forms. I would love to know your thoughts on the activity. Is this something that you are really excited about trying out? Or maybe this is something that you are already incorporating into your class. Let us know how that works for your students. Thank you so much for watching this video. I would love it if you would give this video a like, subscribe if you have not already, and hit that notification bell so that you can get notified when I upload a brand new video. See you next time. Bye.